Good Monday morning. Welcome into Morning JOX, JOX 94.5. Damian Mitchell alongside Conrad Van Order as we are 4 to 8 hours away from Christmas Day. And boy, oh boy, what an exciting weekend. Or was it exciting in the grand scheme of it all? We got college football playoff, the first edition of the 12-team playoff, and the first round matchups did not go as we anticipated. Well, I'll put it like this. They were not as competitive as I thought they would be. If you pretty much like this, if you got the home game, your fans showed up and they had a great time. We got to start off Friday night with Notre Dame and Indiana, and then we had the triple header with SMU and Penn State. Dang, got a little choked up. Texas and Clemson, and then the nightcap on Saturday night with Ohio State and Tennessee. So, Conrad, I think we'll go in order. So the first game Friday night, Notre Dame and Indiana. Let's go ahead and nip it in the bud right quick. Indiana looked absolutely outmatched in every single way possible. They didn't look like they belong there, which actually sounds like a recurring thing for just about every team that lost over the weekend. But just the first game Friday night. How was your viewing experience? Did you enjoy the game? Did the game go how you thought it would?
Yeah, I mean, the game went almost exactly how I thought it would, minus the final, 5 minutes or so where Indiana made it look a lot better than it was. Because I mean, you go back to, again, I mean, it's kind of like the Ohio State game. Granted, this game ended up being closer. I mean, if you look at the box score, you're like, oh, they lost by 10. That's not bad for, a game where we all kind of thought Indiana maybe wasn't going to get in here and actually win a game. But much like the Ohio State game, they were able to make it look a little prettier in the box score at the end than it really was if you watch the entire game. Because, no, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, and this is something we're going to talk about a lot here today and over the next coming weeks probably is they didn't look like they should be on the same field as Notre Dame. And I will say this, I mean, going into the game, I said last week a couple times that I thought this was the best Notre Dame team that we've seen in, a while. Honestly, going back probably a couple of decades, I thought they were better than, the 2012 team that went to national championship, those playoff teams that they had before, and they showed that, right? They looked physical. They were they looked like one of the elite college football programs with just the size and athleticism, and it didn't look all that much different than what you see, if you're watching a team in the SEC, really. And so I think for me, it was more just Notre Dame. I mean, I saw this a couple times, and it's the easiest way to explain it is Notre Dame did to Indiana what every other team's done to Notre Dame in the playoff for the last 15 years, essentially. And I was impressed by the way that Notre Dame handled their business, and they went out there and they knew they were the better team, and they, asserted their will, essentially. And the game was never close. I mean, maybe you were it got interesting at the end, but I think we all knew at that point it was just desperation for Indiana, and Notre Dame was already mentally in New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl. So, but no, I mean, I thought it was an impressive win for Notre Dame, and like we all thought, Indiana had a great season. They won 11 games. It was the best season in school history. Hats off to them. Nothing against them, but you could just tell when they were out there on the field, they didn't have the guys to match up.
Not at all. Not that, the score ended up being 27-17, but if you watch the game, at no point did you think Indiana really was within striking range of Notre Dame. Especially after Jeremiah Love's 98-yard touchdown run, you kind of looked at it as like, yep, I see how this game is going to look for the rest of the way. And it did.
Yeah, I mean, it was... Again, I understand it was 27-17. It was 27-3 with 6 minutes left in the game.
Right.
And so I think that's really the lasting impression that a lot of people that watch the entire game have.
Absolutely. Now Notre Dame advances to take on Georgia there in the Sugar Bowl.
It's gonna be a good one.
On New Year's Day. And to Conrad's point, if you haven't watched this Notre Dame team and you watched them Friday night, yes, they are not the Notre Dame teams of years past. I think this team is for real. Riley Leonard looked in control. They were able to establish the run game early on and made everything else easier for them. And I think defensively, they went out there and handled their business. So that was Friday night. Then you woke up Saturday morning for Penn State and SMU, and it feels like Kevin Jennings may have still been asleep on Friday night because That was probably one of the worst quarterback performances I've ever seen in a playoff game. It was absolutely disgusting. That son gun looked like he did not realize the magnitude of which this game was. I just don't believe. I mean, credit to SMU for their regular season and how they handled their business. They gave Clemson a nice fight in the ACC title game. But Penn State absolutely looked like, why are y'all on the field with us right now? Shout out to James Franklin. I don't know if this is quote unquote considered a big win, but by the law, by the definition, it is. It's a playoff game.
Yeah.
And Penn State went out there and handled their business as they knocked off SMU 38-10. And at no point did SMU look like they belonged on the football field as well with Penn State.
Yeah, no, this was by far the worst game of the weekend. Because at least, again, like I was saying in the Indiana game, maybe at the end it got a little intriguing, or it wasn't, just a total blowout in the first half. Yeah, I mean, SMU, and again, going into the game, this is one of the things that I brought up, and it was you go back to the ACC title game, and I know that SMU had a great second half, and they made a good comeback effort against Clemson. But you could watch in the first half of that game, and that was a team that had not been in that kind of a situation where, potentially your season is on the line, right? If you lose, you might not be in the playoff, but if you win, you're going to go to the playoff, and it's going to be a big moment. And they couldn't handle the spotlight. Like, they very clearly, I mean, they had, I think the stat that they kept bringing up was drop passes in that game. And they had, I think, the same amount of drop passes in that game that they had the entire season so far. And there's a really easy way to explain that, right? And it's nerves. Those are the kinds of mistakes you make when you're nervous and you have pressure on you and you're not used to being in that situation and having to perform in those situations. And, unfortunately, that they proved that again against Penn State. They clearly are not ready for that type of environment. And again, it doesn't mean they didn't have a great year. It doesn't mean they don't have good players. It doesn't mean Rhett Lashley is a bad coach. It just means, again, you can watch and look at some of the guys that line up and go, they're just not built like the other teams in the playoff are. And again, it goes back to the whole conversation that everyone's been having of, well, is it about who's the most deserving or who's the best? Because to a certain degree, you kind of know who the best teams are, right? Because you typically know who has the best players, who has the most 5 stars, who has the best, transfer classes, etc. And I'm not saying that's the way that you just determine it, because at that point, what's the point of playing the games, right? But it was very clearly, even more so than the Indianas of the world, that SMU wasn't ready for it. I mean, look at, we'll talk about Clemson and Texas, but I think you watch that game and you go, okay, even as bad as Clemson was at times this year and as many knocks as we had against them, you can see that there are still players on that roster that fit what you would expect a big-time college football program to look like, and that's why you had a pretty competitive game for the most part against Texas, or at least the most competitive game of the weekend, because even as much as we thought, oh, Clemson sucks, they don't deserve to be in there, you look at them versus SMU, a team everybody thought deserved to be in there, and clearly Clemson was much more competitive going up against a team like Texas than SMU was against a team like Penn State. So, I mean, again, it was a great year for SMU. I understand people that are, well, how would this game look if Alabama was in it? Or how would this game look if Ole Miss was in it? And I totally understand that argument. I think we can all agree these games would have been more competitive if you had some of those SEC teams in there. But at the same time, what was true 2 weeks ago is still true now. The excuses didn't magically pop up overnight for those teams. You still lost games you shouldn't have lost. And that's where, at the end of the day, as much as I can sit there and go, man, I would have loved to see Alabama or Ole Miss play Penn State, and I think it would have been a better game. I think a lot of people would agree with that. We also saw those teams have duds this year as well, and there's nothing to say, like we saw with Tennessee, for example, that wouldn't have happened for one of these teams as well. But I think we can all agree that SMU, great story, definitely not one of the 12 best teams.
No, excuse me, not at all. Now Penn State advances to take on Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. That game on New Year's Eve. Right now, Penn State a 10.5-point favorite. That's a little early, but I mean, from what we saw from Penn State Saturday, all right, Ashton Genty, now's your chance. Now is your chance. If you can bust out, a 30-carry, 200-yard game, and Boise State finds a way to get it done, you'll at least not debunk the theory that some of these teams just don't belong in this playoff.
I will say my other hope, and we can talk about this more in depth later, but the fact that now you're going to neutral sites or the bowl sites to play these games, I just wonder how much of an impact that might potentially have, because I think we all clearly saw that the home field advantage
it's massive.
was a massive advantage in the first round.
Absolutely. And continuing on Saturday, after we got done with SMU and Penn State, we got the chance to see SEC representation as the Texas Longhorns knocked off the Clemson Tigers 38-24, my apologies. And if you watch the game, Phil Maffa goes down for Clemson, and they just could not establish a run game at any point. All this pressure was on Cade Klubnik to go out there and make plays, which he did. But when you find yourself down, what was it, 28-10 at half, you're asking a lot for a guy that's like, man, we need something. We need some more juice somewhere, and I really can't do this all by myself. But a lot of credit to Cade Klubnik, because he earned a lot of my respect because he kept fighting.
Oh, yeah.
He kept finding a way to at least keep Clemson within punching range. But for Texas, once that running game got going, there was nothing Clemson could do. They could not stop them offensively. I think, Quinn Ewers to me is very interesting because I think he's either going to be the hero that they want him to be at quarterback, or he is going to be the Achilles heel of what Texas is going to do operationally. I think something's just off with him. It just doesn't look clean. It doesn't look polished, and he's a multi-year starter in college football. And it's like, man, you're still making these kind of mistakes as a starting quarterback where he's throwing it into coverage. He's throwing, bad balls. And it's just like.
It's like Jalen Milroe. I mean, they're different players, but in the sense of a lot of college football fans across the country would go, yeah, I'll take that guy as my quarterback. But if you're an Alabama fan or a Texas fan watching them, you're like, man, if we had a quarterback that was a little bit better, imagine how good we can be. And I think that the Alabama and Texas fans kind of can relate on that point of they're good, but they can hold you back sometimes as well.
Absolutely. But the two-headed monster in the backfield for Texas, Quintravian Wisner and Jaden Blue. One, I just didn't know how fast Jaden Blue was because it looks like he's like running effortless. Like he is just gliding, and you see him start to separate from defensive backs. It's like, wait a minute. I thought the dude had the ankle on him. Nope.
I was about to say on the last touchdown run, I'm
my God.
Okay, this is going to be a big play, but they're going to bring him down, and they just somehow never caught up to him.
And he was in complete cruise control. Like, he's fast. He's fast. But Texas absolutely dominates Clemson. The score was a little bit closer, the closest game of the first round, as Texas knocks off Clemson 38-24. And, of course, the nightcap. And this one's going to be tough. But Tennessee takes the trip to Columbus, Ohio to take on Ohio State, and that game was over rather quickly. We're going to have a conversation about Nico Malieva because when he's on, looks great. And then you start to dive into like when he's on, it's against the Kent States, the NC States of the world, because when they step up in competition, Nico looks like he looks worse than Joe Milton at quarterback.
Whoa. He played great against Vanderbilt.
Like I said, when he steps up in competition, he looks like Joe Milton at quarterback. But Tennessee absolutely gets demolished by Ohio State 42-17. And really and truly, it all started in the first quarter. How that game started was the absolute worst thing that could happen for Tennessee, because you get them in a third down, and then you get a face mask. You stop them. They end up scoring that drive. And Ohio State did not take their foot off the gas. They're like, okay, offensively, defensively. And think about the last game that we saw with Ohio State against Michigan. It looked like that offense was just obsolete.
Yep.
They had no answer for anything. I mean, Michigan was able to just line it up and say, we're better than you. Like, we're going to get y'all into the fist fight, and we're ready for this. We're prepared for this. And that's exactly what they turned it into. But then to flip it around and how they played in the playoffs against Tennessee, jumping out in that first quarter, 21-0. And really and truly, it took Tennessee the entire second quarter to finally to come up for air. And you thought, okay, well, they could probably make it a little bit interesting. And Ohio State said, nah, this is the separation for the big boys. And Tennessee, for everything that they accomplished during the regular season, they just got beat down. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. At every single level, offensively, defensively, didn't feel like Nico could ever get in any sort of rhythm. Dylan Sampson goes out with an injury. early on, and he couldn't have any sort of flow for the offense. And Ohio State was just like, all right, well, since y'all don't want to go out here and play around, we'll handle this. And they went out there and just beat the brakes off Tennessee. No ands, ifs, or buts about it.
Yeah, I thought this game was, kind of a good example of the entire college football season, honestly, just in the sense of it's been all over the place and it's been very hard to pinpoint. All right, are these teams for real? Do these teams have cracks? Like, is this team, are they trending in the right direction? Because, similarly to how we all went, how did Ohio State lose to Michigan? How does Alabama lose to Vanderbilt? How does Notre Dame lose to Northern Illinois? Yet we've also seen some really high highs from all of these teams that have had just dumbfounding mistakes over the course of the season. And so the fact that Ohio State showed up and went out there and looked like the best team in the country on Saturday night, it's just kind of the perfect example of how you never really know what's going to happen in college football, especially this year. And teams can be just so up and down because, I mean, there's nobody in their right mind could have predicted that Ohio State was going to play like that on Saturday, right? With everything going into the game, how you looked your last time out. I mean, huge shout out. The only time I may ever give credit to the Tennessee fan base. But man, the fact that they had over 30,000 fans there, like that is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen a fan base do. And just all of those factors going in, I mean, I guess ultimately motivated Ohio State, but yeah, good Lord, it was just an absolute beatdown. And, the problem that Tennessee had a lot of the year was they had slow starts and they didn't score a lot of points in the first half.
Yep.
And that ultimately came to bite them. And I mean, this was a game where, you go back to something like the Tennessee-Alabama game, for example, where it felt like everything that could go against Tennessee that could possibly go wrong went wrong for them in that first half. But you look up at the scoreboard and you're only down 7-0. Easy for you to get back in the game. When it's 21-0 in the first quarter, that ain't happening.
Nope.
And no, I mean, Ohio State, they look like the team we all thought they were, right? They have great receivers. Throw the ball to those receivers. They have a two-headed monster running back. Great. When you throw the ball effectively, it's going to open up the lanes for them more, and then they're going to be able to do their thing, and it's all going to work in tandem. The defense was great for Ohio State, as they have been all year. I was super impressed. This one was a big shock to me because, again, I don't think any of us would have been surprised with Indiana or SMU losing or Clemson losing. And maybe not even surprised that Tennessee lost the game, just the fact that they lost by 25 and it was you were never really in that game.
Nope.
I mean, maybe you had a glimmer of hope coming out of halftime that, all right, if we score here, it's maybe a 10-point game and we can make it interesting, but no, it wasn't it. The defense wasn't there. I don't think they sacked Will Howard a single time on Saturday night. Dylan Sampson getting hurt, obviously that was a big detriment because I think a big part of the reason I like Tennessee in that game is because of their run game and knowing it's cold outside, they're going to be able to run the football. And without Dylan Sampson, that just wasn't a thing. And then, like you said, Nico
he's bad.
He's got a lot of room to grow this offseason.
Absolutely. If Brady Cook can make the jump, so can Nico.
Yep. Hopefully.
He's got the coach to do it.
He does.
He's got the coach that
and Josh Heupel has been coaching his ass off all year long, and he's just been sitting there watching those passes just sail right over the top.
And to Ohio State, if you did not know the name Jeremiah Smith, let me remind you, that grown man out there was playing high school football last year. He is a true freshman. At 18 years old, doing first looks like a grown man playing receiver. And if you put the ball anywhere around him, it's his. So Ohio State fans, you got a gem at the receiver position in Jeremiah Smith. And it doesn't matter who's at quarterback. Find a way to get forward the ball and let the chips fall where they may. But Ohio State moves on and sets up a rematch with Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Texas advance over Clemson, and they will take on Arizona State in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. It's time for some reaction. 205-834-9450. The phone line, text lines are open. Just reacting to everything in the college football playoff. What are your thoughts? Did the committee just show you that, hey, they got it wrong? The 12 best teams weren't in the college football playoff, or maybe you just enjoyed watching college football at the highest level in a playoff setting. We want to get your reaction. 205-834-9450. Keep the conversation going here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5. I didn't hear it as much Saturday night as I had all season long.
I heard it pregame.
I felt like it was a faint one right there in the second quarter after Nico had the touchdown run. I think I heard it. I was like, oh, okay, so the band does still work. Hadn't heard from him in a minute because Ohio State absolutely beat down Tennessee 42-17. Welcome back into Morning JOX. JOX 94.5, Damian Mitchell alongside Conrad Van Order, and you as well, 205-834-9450. Of course, the JOX text line, phone lines are always open with us. Got some reaction here just wrapping up, going over the weekend. Somebody texts in and says, Maplesville High School would have given Penn State a better football game. Yeah, I don't know. I saw what Maplesville did in the state championship against another 1A school. I don't know if they've been ready for Penn State, but SMU, yeah. I mean, Kevin Jennings within the first 3 snaps, I was like, oh, this game might be a little too big for you, boy. Like it was bad. SMU, for everything that we had seen in the regular season, and it felt like their offensive line could not block a soul. They couldn't stop Penn State for nothing. They were just rushing 3, and it felt like Kevin James was back there running for his life. And that's where I was kind of like, he's playing a lot more hero ball than I've seen him play all season long. Like a lot of this ripping and running and trying to keep his eyes down the field. That ain't gonna get it, big dog. You have to stand up in the pocket, stand tall. And even when he did, he still threw it to the other team. And it was interesting because I think, like to your point early on, the home field advantage that these places had. I mean, every venue was rocking. It was loud. It felt like, okay, yeah, this is definitely a little bit different because especially Notre Dame, that Friday night, didn't know what exactly it was going to look like, but everybody was dialed in for that matchup in the college football playoff. In the first edition we get of the 12-team college football playoff in college football, I mean, overall, and everybody's saying, oh, the games weren't competitive. We've seen some blowouts in the 4-team version. I mean, anytime Notre Dame was in the playoff, you saw what happened to them. I mean, you think about what LSU in their run in 2019 when they beat the absolute brakes off Oklahoma in the semifinal matchup where Justin Jefferson had 4 touchdowns in the first half. It's okay. We've seen even Alabama when they beat up on Oklahoma in 2018. It's like, oh, well, we've seen these stories in these games before, but I think now because the field is expanded, instead of having the quote unquote 12 most deserving, you need to have the 12 best. And I think that's going to be the committee's conversation from this point forward, no matter how many teams they finally settle upon. But I do think that you have to get the 12 best teams in.
Yeah. And I'll say this, I think, a sentiment that I guess was shared this weekend was, I'll just say this, if you were on social media, it was kind of a cesspool, to be completely honest with you, because you just had so many people that were, first off, if you were on Twitter, nobody enjoyed the games. Like that was the takeaway from Twitter. Nobody enjoyed the games. The games all sucked. Nobody had fun watching them. And all it was people complaining about why this team wasn't in instead of this team that just got blown out. And again, like I said earlier, do I think that the games would have been more competitive if the SEC teams had been in there? Probably. Do I think the outcomes would have been different in some cases? Maybe. But based on how all those teams played, it's pretty easy to say at home, who's to say that Alabama or Ole Miss or South Carolina would have gone up there and won those games. I think the difference, though, and somebody like an SMU and what you saw from Tennessee is, going into the process, nobody was looking at Tennessee and going, I don't know if they deserve to be in here. All right. They clearly deserve to be in there. They were clearly one of the 12 best teams. They had beaten the team that everybody wanted in Alabama. They played in the SEC. Like, okay, they got blown out against Georgia and they lost to Arkansas. Yes. But nobody was questioning whether Tennessee was one of the 12 best teams or whether they should have been in the playoff. Whereas with the SMUs and Indianas of the world, there were a lot of people and a lot of us here that were very skeptical about their ability to compete, and they clearly showed that they couldn't. So, are you going to have blowouts in the playoff? Probably more years than not. Yeah, there'll probably be at least one blowout most seasons. That's just the way that these games are going to go. But you don't want an entire first round of blowouts, and I think that's where it goes. And part of that, too, would help with the seeding and changing some of the seeding to where maybe you have, Arizona State versus Boise State as a first-round game instead of both of those teams getting byes. And now in the quarterfinals, you're going to have 2 games with a double-digit favorite when you should have the 8 best teams in college football, and you wouldn't think that would really happen. So, I get arguments on both sides, and I do think change is going to come. I think there will be differences next year. I think they're going to make changes in this offseason
Yeah.
to the playoff format of next year. But we really do have to figure out a better way of identifying the best teams and the teams that can give you the most competitive matchups. Because ultimately, that's what it is at the end of the day. When you have teams that are in the playoff, and I know there has to be automatic qualifiers under the system, but you can go and look at the odds to win, and I understand anything could happen, but I think as we saw this weekend, clearly the best teams are going to handle their business.
Yep.
And, you shouldn't have, when you have, 5 teams that are all right up there, really close to each other in the odds, and then you have an Arizona State that's plus 6,000 or a Boise State that's plus 5,000 to win. There's just such a big gap between some of these teams. And, I think moving forward, we have to find a way to view strength of schedule. Who you play matters, and who you beat has to matter.
Yes.
And regardless of how many wins you have in whatever conference you play in, that cannot be the ultimate deciding factor in who gets into a playoff, because I'm sorry, but SMU and Indiana should not have been in the playoff. If you want to say Tennessee should have been in the playoff, you can have that argument too. But I think we all know at the end of the day, very clearly, those were 2 teams that they just don't have the players to match up. And that's nothing against them. Great seasons, but clearly those 2 things were not like the others. And I go back to the Clemson argument where, I don't think anybody would have said Clemson was more deserving of SMU getting in the playoff prior to the ACC championship game, but we clearly saw that Clemson was able to compete at a higher level because of the caliber of players they have on their roster.
Yep. And I agree with you 100%. And also, I think it didn't matter who Ohio State plays Saturday. If Ohio State plays like that, I'm
Oregon by 3 touchdowns.
Exactly. Like if I'm Oregon, I'm like, whoo, hopefully they stump their toe or something, or before they go up to and rematch with them again, because that Ohio State team that took the field Saturday night, don't nobody in the college football playoff ready to see that. Like that was an upper tier beatdown. Like that was just a straight up beatdown.
And that's another problem with the system, is if you're Oregon, you're sitting there like, great, so this is our reward for going 13-0, winning our conference and being the number 1 team essentially the entire season. Oh, we now get to play the hottest team in the country, probably, or the team that's playing like the best team in the country after Saturday, when I think a lot of us would agree and go, man, why are you not playing Boise State again? Why are you not playing Arizona State?
Yep.
But nope, you get Ohio State.
Absolutely. Goose texting and says, I know everyone's going to say they got it wrong, but the truth is the same result would have happened with Bama, Ole Miss, South Carolina, etc. What we got wrong is going to 12 teams. Should have just expanded to 8. With 12 or even 14, you're going to have these blowouts because there's a big difference between a top 5 team and a top 15 team. And I agree. I
think you could make a fair argument about that as well. And I think this is a good year where, I think right now we've probably got about 6 teams that you look at and you go, okay, those would be competitive matchups, but, there's 12 teams in the playoffs, so you got to put 12 teams in. It's just, and I can't really argue against, again, him saying, well, would the outcomes be different if the SEC teams have been in there? Maybe not. But I think we can all agree that at least in our hypothetical examples, that the games would have been more competitive because the players are more talented and they would match up better. And even if they still, all the winners were the same, the games probably would have been more competitive.
Absolutely. Mike takes it and says, the committee can only say they got 5 through 8 correct. 9 through 12, absolutely embarrassing. I know, man. I don't know. I really do not. I don't know. After this weekend, everything that I thought about, because when you look, the committee have to make a change next year because they have to value strength of schedule. And to Doug's point, he texted and said strength of schedule won each game. The team with the higher strength of schedule coming into it won their game, and they won it convincingly. And I think that for the matchups that we're going to see, even for the neutral site games, like I don't feel confident that a Boise State is about to beat up on Penn State, especially after what Penn State had just done. I think it'll be a competitive ball game, but also it's more of the unknown factor of, okay, can Boise State keep this running? Arizona State, you're matching up with Texas, and if Texas is able to run the ball like they just did against Clemson, it's going to be you're going to have to shorten the game up, and Scatterboo's got to run for nearly 500 yards by himself.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say another thing, and this really goes back to the Indiana Notre Dame game is, something that surprised me is it feels like, these coaches, like what you're going to have with Kenny Dillingham in Arizona State, what you had with Signetti in Indiana, what you had with Lashley and SMU is, if I'm those coaches, I'm kind of looking like we're playing with house money, right? Like
Yep.
we got into the playoff. I know that ultimately, yes, you want to win the playoff, and that's what you're going to say, but nobody expected you to be there, right? So you made the playoff. You know you're going into a game where nobody's really expecting you to win. And then Indiana was the worst offender of this. Why are you punting when you're down 3 scores late, like in the fourth quarter?
Man.
You still have a chance to potentially make something happen, but you decide to not get aggressive until the last 5 minutes when even though you go down and score 2 touchdowns, it's too late and it doesn't matter. And, it was just some of these situations that these teams and coaches were in where I understand why you're kind of playing conservative. I guess like it would make sense in a playoff game if it was a close game. But I mean, some of these guys were essentially waving the white flag, early on in these matchups, and you're just kind of going, so what got you here? And especially in Signetti's case, who let's be honest, that man likes to talk the talk.
Yep.
He absolutely did not walk the walk on Saturday or on Friday night. And you're just sitting there going, okay, so you're going to sit out here and pump your chest out and talk about how great you are and how we're not scared to play anybody. And then you're going to go out there and punt when you have a chance to, make this game competitive. But oh no, they're sorry that we just don't have the guys. We got to wave the white flag. What, 8 hours after you're on national television talking about how all you do is kick top 25 teams' asses?
Yep.
Oh, wait, you lost to all the ones you played this year. Like, it's just stuff like that where it's like, man, what are you doing? Like, you made it this far. You had a certain style of football that got you this far, and now you're going to completely walk away from it in the biggest moment of the season. It's just, again, I think a lot of it at the end of the day was these teams and these coaches were not ready for the spotlight. That doesn't take anything away from what they accomplished in the regular season. But again, why are we just handing out invitations to teams that are deserving that are clearly showing us they're not ready for the spotlight?
Yep. And to your point, somebody just texted and says, let's stop using the word deserving. It doesn't belong in the selection process. At this point, after what we just saw over the weekend, I do agree. We need the 12 best. Not the 12 most deserving, the 12 best. We'll keep the conversation going on the other side. We see your text messages, see your calls. We'll get to them right here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5.
6:40. Welcome in to Morning JOX here. 2 days away from Christmas. Hope all of you are getting your last minute shopping done, enjoying some wonderful time with friends and family, and hopefully inside because it's really, really cold outside this morning. It was below freezing when I woke up this morning, which means I'm wearing socks. If you listen to Three Man Front, you know that by now. But we do want to get more of your reaction on what happened in the college football playoff this weekend. We're going to get to your calls and your texts here in a minute, but just because we have the playoff doesn't mean that the transfer portal has stopped. And this morning, we had big news coming out of the transfer portal as, honestly, in the last handful of minutes or so, we have found out that Auburn has landed Eric Singleton, the wide receiver transfer from Georgia Tech. He was the #1 wide receiver in the portal. This is a guy that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks now, and it is a big pickup there for Auburn. So he was a big target for them. He officially commits to the Tigers this morning. So alongside the Cam Colemans of the world, the Perry Thompsons, the Malcolm Simmons of the world, looks like Auburn is going to be right back where they are next year, and I would expect him to have a Keandre Lambert-Smith type impact on the Tigers next year. And then for Alabama, the wheels started turning a little bit this weekend. You had three pretty nice pickups if you're Alabama. You had Isaiah Horton, the wide receiver from Miami, who probably factors in as maybe the #3 receiver next year. You had Cam Dewberry, the offensive lineman from Texas A&M commit, who will probably take Tyler Booker's spot there at left guard. And then you also have Nakai Hill-Green, the linebacker from Colorado, who was an all-Big 12 player this year and fills a big need there for Alabama. So good weekend for both Alabama and Auburn out of the transfer portal.
Absolutely. Let's go to the phone lines, 205-834-9450. Just getting some reaction on the exciting weekend that was college football playoff. Let's go to Josh in Birmingham. Wants to talk some ball with us this morning. What's going on, Josh?
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Hey, man, no complaints, brother. No complaints.
That's good. That's good. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. What I want to say is, as far as, the whole conversation about whether or not certain teams deserve to be there, I'll kind of put it like this. Let's say you're a single man, you're put together, neat, make a lot of money, and you meet a woman that's a 10. She's perfect to you. Everything that you look for in a woman, visually, personality-wise, she's just everything that you want. And you get her number, you invite her out to dinner, y'all go on a date, and you absolutely fumble the date. You start talking politics, you tell her who you voted for, you tell her your body count, all the things you ain't supposed to bring up, you bring them up. And the date goes awful. You never hear from her again. Now, in theory, did you deserve the date with that woman? Of course you did. You have the resume to say, this is what I bring to the table, preemptively. Just because you don't show up don't mean you didn't deserve to be there. And that's kind of how I feel about SMU and Indiana. Like, were there teams that maybe, if you look at the rosters on paper, were a little bit better? I mean, of course, there's Indiana and SMU. But at the same time, my issue with those other teams is that you didn't take care of your business. Alabama's like, the guy that, you would say 90% of women would find attractive, but they have a fatal flaw, like they don't shower regularly or something. And I just think, we kind of have to stop looking at it from the scope of, oh, well, we know it's Alabama, or we know it's Ole Miss, we know it's South Carolina. Alabama was a little unpredictable this year themselves. I don't think anybody expected them to go on the road and lose in Nashville. I don't think anybody expected them to go to Norman and get blanked by 20-some points. So I think, you kind of get in muddy waters when you start talking, deserving versus best team. I agree with Conrad, and it's been a sentiment from a lot of people, is that we just have to reseed when the season's over. I'm sorry, Arizona State and Boise State should have been playing this weekend.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think Texas should have been at the house, and I
Penn
think
State.
You can either say Penn State or Notre Dame. One of those two probably should have been at the house. So that's my thoughts on it. I just hope next year they just do like a reshuffle. And I think also with the automatic qualifiers, I think it's time to get rid of that, because what you're gonna have with these 9-game schedules that's coming pretty soon, you're gonna have 3-loss champions. And I'm sorry, if you're a 3-loss, let's say you're a 3-loss champion, and you got a team, like a 10-2 SEC team that took care of, like, even if you're a 3-loss champion, you should probably be playing. That's just kind of how I feel about it. And I'll hang up and let you guys discuss.
Hey, Josh, we appreciate you, man. Anytime.
That was a good call.
That
was entertaining.
That was. I like the analogy. I like the example.
I wasn't totally sure where it was going at first, but no, that was pretty spot on in my opinion. I mean, it's kind of like we were talking about earlier. Do I think the games would have been more competitive with some of the SEC teams in the mix? Yes.
Yep.
Can I prove that? No. Would the outcomes have been any different if they had been in there? Maybe not. But I think, again, you can look at it and you can come away and go, okay, those are teams that didn't quite deserve to be in there. But again, I mean, I'm sure, when Notre Dame was in the 4-team playoff, there were a lot of times we went, do they really deserve to be in here? But you have to have 4 teams. So both things, here's the thing that I think a lot of people struggle with maybe is both things can be true, right? We can look at this from both sides and acknowledge that both sides of it are true and that it needs to be better in the future.
I agree with you. Let's go to Don Don, who wants to talk with us this morning. What's happening this morning, Don Don?
Hey, good morning, my buddies. How are you?
Hey, no complaints, brother.
I tell you what, guys, Josh is turning into be a pretty dadgum good caller, man. That was a great comparison. And trust me, guys, and Damien, you know about it. That sounds like one of my dates where I would say something stupid and they walk off, Damien.
I appreciate the honesty this morning, Don.
Well, yeah, and hey, that's a good breaking news about Singleton, huh, Conrad? Boy, I tell you what, we're going to have a hell of a receiving corps.
We said the same thing.
Are.
Said same thing this year.
Okay, but hey, what did y'all think about my Auburn basketball team Saturday? I went to that game. That place was packed out and going nuts, man. And tell you what, Alabama and Auburn both. I know we're talking about football today, but Alabama and Auburn both, man. But we're lucky to have these two basketball teams both in the top 10. I'm hoping that Auburn's number 1 today. They should be. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying for a few weeks, I think Auburn's the best team in the country, and to do what they did to Purdue is pretty impressive. And Janai Broome, he didn't look hurt to me.
And no, sir. Well, I got there early, Conrad, to watch him in warm-ups, and I texted Pat and said he didn't look too good. As usual, I'm wrong again.
Well, I'm sure you were glad to be wrong about that one.
Yes, I was. But, hey, guys, while I got a minute, I want to tell y'all thank you for everything you guys do for us, everything. You guys are 2 young guns, along with Molly and everything. Y'all got a bright future, but I want you guys and your family, and Conrad especially, and Miss Paige and Jackie, and game into your family, too. I hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas, my friends.
Absolutely. You as well, Don Don. We appreciate you. Merry Christmas, brother. We'll keep the conversation going on the other side. 205-834-9450. Your text message, your calls here on the back half of it. Keep it locked right here on JOX 94.5 for Morning JOX. 6:53 here on Morning JOX, JOX 94.5. Yes, we are a couple days away from Christmas. Hope everybody has a safe holiday week. We'll be back live here on Friday as we get a chance to spend some time with our loved ones, have Christmas. You got all your Christmas shopping done, Conrad?
Yes, I did. I forgot about something and I had to go get it yesterday, but yeah, I'm done now.
Yeah. I wrapped mine up over the weekend as well, and just know that good thing I don't want to go down the Santa Claus route, but it's inflation.
You have somebody else on your list this year now too, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And forgot about that cost. Like, it's kind of like, whoa.
It's about time. You forgot to look at the calendar when the courting process was underway.
I missed the summer. I missed the summer wave.
That's right.
I missed that summer wave. I thought that was the prime position of it. If you're gonna get me, you're gonna get me. But then the back half, whoa. But no, it's gonna be fun, man. Hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful week for Christmas. Safe travels to and from your destination, and a lot of love. Hopefully everybody gets everything on their list, and Santa's he's checking it twice to make sure everybody's got their stuff. I know for Tennessee fans, I know you probably wanted to win, but it happens. It happens. The old
now you get to save money. You don't have to play to go to the other playoff games, right?
You don't. You don't.
That's a gift.
But I think the college football playoff, it's here. The 12-team edition. We know what the matchups are going to be moving forward as to start things off on New Year's Eve. Boise State will take on Penn State 6:30 there in the Fiesta Bowl, and then we have Arizona and Texas on New Year's Day. Texas right now 14-point favorite, by the way, just giving you that little nugget of information.
It's gonna be great.
Absolutely. And then the Rose Bowl again on New Year's Day. Oregon and Ohio State set to do a battle again. And then the nightcap at the Sugar Bowl, Georgia and Notre Dame. So we're gonna get closer and closer to a national champion. We're getting there. Hopefully everybody enjoyed their first round playoffs. I know G-Mac did. I mean, he called the first ever 12-team playoff game. Did a great job too. He seemed a little bit more juiced up than he had been. I think even he realized the magnitude of the game. He did a great call there for Indiana and Notre Dame, and he's set to hit the road again for the weekend of college football coming up here on the back half of Christmas. Again, for Conrad Van Order, I'm Damian Mitchell. Mac and Cube in the morning there next. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful holiday.